we've unrolled the brisket. Rather than having a rolled piece, they're rolled purely for presentation. It makes it very difficult if you cook it as a rolled piece. When you come to carving it, it's very difficult because it won't carve because it's such kind of tender meat and sinewy, so it's very difficult to then slice it. So what's easier is if you cook it as a flat piece, and then later on I'll show you one that's coming out of the oven, and then you kind of shred it, and then we will show you how to do the sauce and everything to go with it.
So this isn't the cut of meat that you would cut into steaks or into a sandwich?
No. So what you've got here is, because of quite a lot of exercise, you've got quite a lot of connective tissue kind of running through it. What that's going to do is break down nice and gently. It's going to turn into gelatin in this long, slow cooking, and then keep your meat nice and moist. So you would never want to cut this into steaks and try and cook, because it would be very, very tough. So first of all, what we want to do, if you just have a look in the pans, the black casserole dishes that you've got, inside those, you have got some red wine and some stock.
Smells
and some
delicious.
dried mushrooms and some thyme. Now what's important is that your stock you're using for this is a homemade stock made from bones, rather than using a stock cube, which can be very salty. And later on, what we're going to do is this liquid will be reduced right down almost by 2/3. And if you're using stock cubes, it will have a very, very salty flavour. So what we're going to do is just get those liquids on and get those nice and hot. So what we actually want to do...
So this hasn't been cooked yet, Hannah?
No, nothing at all has happened to it. If we just leave the lid off, actually, Melissa, and then we can keep an eye on it. So what we don't want to do is season this, because if we season it, place it into that liquid, cook it for 4 or 5 hours, all the salt's going to come out. You're then going to reduce your liquid down, and you're going to end up with a very, very salty reduced sauce. So what we'll do, the one that you're going to taste and have a look at hasn't had any seasoning, and if you taste that one, you'll probably see that it doesn't need any. You can always add it at the end, but better not to have any in at the beginning. So if you just pop your pans back onto the heat again now, and what we're going to do is just to get those now browning. We literally just really, you can see on where the side where the fat is, you just want to get a little bit of colour on there, and also on the other sides as well, because when you're doing a long slow cook, what will happen is, as it's cooking in that liquid, all this lovely colour that you've got on here will wash off and give colour and flavour to your stew. Right. So the browning process is quite important for the finished product.
I see.
Okay, if we pop those steaks in.
Do you have to take them like this?
You can take them like that.
Fat side down.
Doesn't matter, either side. Yeah, we'll start with fat side down. That's it. Just pop those into there, and we'll just give them a good kind of minute and a half.
On each side?
On each side, about that.
So then
just to get some nice colour. Yeah. If you just have a little look at this liquid here, if you have a smell of what's going on in there at the moment, it smells quite winey.
Yeah.
All right, and what will happen is, as it boils up a bit more, it will lose that kind of very strong,
winey
raw
smell,
alcohol kind of smell to it.
How do we stop the brisket sticking to the bottom of the pan?
Once it's caramelised, it will self-release. That's it. Quite a heavy piece to lift up. That's lovely. Well done. Okay, so those getting some nice colour now. We're not trying to cook it into the middle or anything like that. All we're trying to do is just get some colour on the outside. So you'll still see that it's completely raw in the centre. It's just the colour. Let's just see, what colour have you got on the other side? Is it nice and brown on the other side? That's lovely. Yeah, we can lift that one up now. Pop that straight in.
Don't let it drain the oil from it.
No, that's fine. Yeah, just let it drip a little bit. That's lovely. Perfect. And then the main thing is to make sure that it's nicely covered with liquid, which that practically is actually. That's looking all right. That's great. And then we'll pop the lid on. And the important thing with this liquid is we're going to go into a very low oven. We're going to go into about 120 degrees. And if you have cold liquid going into a 120-degree oven, it's going to take about an hour just to even come up to temperature. So when you're going into a low oven, you must always make sure it's hot, so that then it just stays at that nice steady 120.
Right, I've been making that mistake.
So then when your recipe says 3 hours and you look at it after 3 hours, you probably wasted 1 hour trying to heat it up.
Once we've transferred from the frying pan into the pot, how long does this stay in the oven for?
This is then going to stay into the oven for about 5 hours. All right, on a nice low temperature.
Oh.
Yeah, nice low temperature. We're looking about 120. What we will need to do with that one is just top up with a little bit of water. This meat that's sticking out is not going to cook because it's not covered in the water.
Oh, it's not immersed fully,
Yeah,
is that
so
what you
it's
mean?
not actually any point in
Right.
having it in there. You need to make sure everything's nicely covered, and then it will all cook at an even rate.
This is a great meal for essentially slow cooking. You can prepare it and then leave it and then come back at the end of the day and you'll have a beautiful meal for your family.
Yeah. And actually, it's better if you do it the day before and leave it, because the flavours will then develop.
Leave it in the oven or just leave it sitting?
So cook it on the Saturday and then have it on the Sunday.
Must we wait 5 hours before we can taste it?
No, we've got one ready to come out of the oven that you can now taste. And we're just going to finish off the sauce and show you that as well. So this one was cooking about 125 degrees. So we're just going to pop that one down on there. Now you can see the liquid's reduced a little bit. Can you also see the difference in the colour
very dark, isn't
of
it?
liquid? Yeah, so everything's washed off and it's all, yeah, can you see the difference there? We're going to lift out this piece of meat, which as you can see
It's already falling
is already
apart.
falling apart.
Ooh.
All right. Now this liquid in there is quite runny and you can see that it's quite watery. All right. It might have a bit of flavour, but it is quite a watery sauce. So what we want to do is reduce that right down. So I'm going to put it on a really, really nice high heat and we're going to boil that up. Now, the reason why we've taken the meat out is you don't want to boil that. Having done 5 hours worth of nice, slow, gentle cooking,
Don't want to kill
we
it.
don't want to then kill it by boiling it in there. So we take the meat out, you can leave it to rest, cover it in foil if it's going to be for a little while, and then reduce the liquid down. What's quite a good idea is at this point, just to have a little taste of that liquid now, so that you can then taste the difference of once it has reduced down and you've got to the right flavour. So what you're doing with the liquid is you're starting off by looking for flavour. And once you're happy with the flavour, we're then going to have a look at the consistency. So at the moment, it will probably have some flavour, but it's quite diluted. A lot of steam coming off, and the bubbles are very, very quick and very little. Okay? As it starts to thicken up and it starts to get the right consistency, they get slower and they get bigger, because basically the liquid's getting more viscous.
Now, for me, that would feed something like a family of 4 or 6.
Yeah.
And that's a low-cost piece of meat.
Yeah. It's the assembly of it and then just leaving it in the oven just to cook. Or a slow cooker, which are kind of coming back again now and people are starting to use slow cookers a bit
But if you
more.
don't want to go to the expense of a slow cooker, most of us in our homes have
And
the
just
hob
use
and then
it.
the oven.
And I'd say
Use
it's
what we
better
have.
cooking it in the oven rather than cooking it on the stove really low, because it does have a tendency to keep boiling when it's on the stove. Whereas you know when it's in there, it's nicely regulated.
120 degrees.
About 120, yeah, and just keep it at that. It normally takes a good 5 minutes or so just to reduce that down, depending on how much liquid you had in there. So, you know, if you've got liquid right up to there, you're looking at getting it right down.
Well, I thought it'd take much longer than that, but it doesn't.
Fairly
though.
quick.
No.
What you're looking for is a nice coating consistency. Okay, so there are various things that you can use, such as corn flour, to thicken
Yeah.
sauces. Corn flour tends to make things quite gloopy. So what's a good thing to use is something called a beurre manier. Equal quantities of butter and flour, which is just made into a paste. So the butter in here is going to give our sauce a nice shine, and the flour, because it's mixed into a paste, will go in nice and easily and thicken that up.
My wife is going to be so impressed.
And you keep this in the freezer, and then you just take little bits when you
Oh,
need it.
so how
you can
much
make
would
up
you
a big,
need?
So for probably what we're thickening, we're looking at that much, probably
which is
maximum.
about a tablespoon
About
and
a
a half.
tablespoon, yeah. Those bubbles now are getting much bigger. What I think we'll do once we've done a couple of minutes is just to use a small amount of that beurre manier, and the best way of putting it in is using one of these sauce whisks. If you just did it with a wooden spoon, it would just stir around and around, where you can actually whisk it in nicely with this.
So 2 minutes, turn the heat off,
Keep the heat on.
keep the heat on.
That's floury, and what you need to do is cook out that floury flavour. So it
Okay.
needs to go into a boiling liquid. So we've put our beurre manier into here, and you can see now that we've reduced from about that level of the pan right the way down, so
So around 2/3.
about 2/3, and that's given it a nice shine and also thickened our sauce. All right, so what we're going to do, Tommy, if you could hold that sieve.
Hannah, this smells, I mean, completely different to when you started. It's got
That's why it's good to taste at the beginning, and then you know where you're heading for. All right. So we've
Over
still got
this?
the mushrooms. Yeah, we've still got the mushrooms in here. So that's the lumps that are just going to come out. All right. We're just going to strain that through. If you just lift it a little bit, just so that's it. That's lovely. Just so it doesn't dribble down. That's great. Lovely. And we'll just sit that back over there.
And will we use the mushrooms?
You can use the mushrooms to serve with it. So once we've shredded the meat, you can put a few mushrooms on top as well if you want to serve it with those, and then a little bit more sauce over the top of that.
Delicious.
There.
Lovely.
And the meat's
That's
been
great.
resting for several minutes now.
Yeah,
Are we
I mean,
ready?
it's not as important with this meat resting, purely because you've cooked it for so long, there's no blood in there or anything, so there's not a lot of juices to lose out of it. But what we want to do is, you can see with this, it's starting to get a bit cold, is you can just pull that apart, you can just pull that into its pieces. And I would say, just really for a portion, you just want to have a few nice big chunky pieces.
Can we taste a little bit of
Of course
this?
you can. It might be better with the sauce. Taste
Well,
this
let's
bit
just
with it.
taste a
Taste some
little bit
without.
on its own, yeah.
And then we'll just move that.
Oh, it's a very distinctive taste, isn't it?
It is, it's quite a strong taste actually. Pop some sauce over the top just to coat it, and then you just need a nice bit of horseradish mash to go with that.